you
And
telling me you are not an Ezra Miller fan? I don't believe that for 1 second.
they should have just recasted it with the freaking Flash from the CW. I don't understand why they didn't. I don't understand why they didn't. Grant's a freaking like the perfect, like he's, in my opinion, because they were still making the TV series and then they're making the movie at the same time. It's like you're putting out two different Flash products. It doesn't make sense. And then on top of that, they ruined his freaking. Sorry, I'm about to get on a tangent. They ruined.
As long as you keep saying freaking and not something else. So yeah, DC. This is another total mess, if you want to call it that, of sorts, because they're sort of in limbo at the moment. With they're winding down their Snyder-verse universe. I don't know. I guess it's just the Snyder-verse. So y'all know me. I'm the biggest Zack Snyder fan. So I'm really disappointed, as you can tell by my emotion about this. Yeah, no, I can't stand Zack Snyder, but just this. I don't know. It's weird because you don't typically when something is rebooted, it's just like, yeah, we're done. We're cutting everything off. We're going to the new thing. I mean, you think of something like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man when he was going to do Spider-Man 4. It's just like there were even, I think, some cast pictures and stuff, and they might have even started some pre-production, and then they're like, just kidding, we're rebooting. And then they just cut it and did the Amazing Spider-Man. So this is not really the case. They're like, hey, all these movies are finished, so we're going to put them out and hope we can make some money off of them. And let's just say that didn't go quite like they had planned. So yeah, what are y'all's thoughts on sort of that transition and where we're at with the DC cinematic universe right now? Go ahead, Christian.
They ruined the Flash, and the Flash is my favorite superhero. And
are you telling me you are not an Ezra Miller fan? I don't believe that for 1 second.
They should have just recasted it with the freaking Flash from the CW. I don't understand why they didn't. I don't understand why they didn't. Grant's a freaking like the perfect, like he's, in my opinion, right, until I see someone better, he's like the Robert Downey Jr. Is to Iron Man, right? Like he's already got the role. He's already got the fan service. Everyone loves him. Why not just cast him as the Flash and intertwine the TV series into the movies? It makes no sense. Because they were still making the TV series and then they're making the movie at the same time. It's like you're putting out two different Flash products. It doesn't make sense. And then on top of that, they ruined his freaking. Sorry, I'm about to get on a tangent. They ruined.
As long as you keep saying freaking and not something else.
They ruined him as far as a character. They made him clumsy, which the Flash is not clumsy. They made him unintelligent because they were trying to make it look like his brain was processing so fast that he wasn't able to think properly, which in actuality, the Flash actually gets a lot of his like street smarts and like all of this from Green Arrow and from Batman and like his tactical ability. And then on top of that, they made it seem like he wasn't super fast and wasn't like powered up, I guess is what I would say, relative to what he should have been if he was the Flash from the Snyder, what's it called?
Snyder cut of the Justice League?
Of the Justice League. Like he's outrunning tornadoes, he's outrunning, explosions. But when you get to his movie, which isn't a prequel, it's not a prequel movie. It's, past all of this, he's slower. It doesn't make sense. So I think that the reboot for DC, I mean, they have a really big opportunity here with, the failures and shortcomings of Marvel to kind of capture the audience. And I personally think DC, as far as their heroes are concerned, outside of, a Spider-Man, right? I think that DC has more popular superheroes than Marvel. And I don't think that's a hot take. I mean, you got Superman, Batman, The Flash, which Aquaman, but like
Well,
you have.
I think the
Sorry.
point you're good. I didn't mean to cut you off, but you're making a good point, and this is what I've heard from comic. I've never been a big comic book reader. I've read some of the Amazing Spider-Man, some of the Batman comics, but other than that, I just really haven't. It just never wasn't. It wasn't really my thing, and so. But in terms of what I've heard comic book fans say is like the big three of the DC, which is Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, uh, typically have typically outsold comic book wise all the Marvel characters except for like Spider Man, and so uh, typically the biggest sellers with Marvel were like Spider Man, Daredevil, like X-Men, Fantastic Four, and so um, you're making a good point to where from a popularity standpoint, those three characters alone can carry the entire DC universe if they just do a good job with them. And so, and we saw that with like the Dark Knight trilogy. We saw that with, people. The Wonder Woman movie was pretty widely accepted. Now, I would say they've done a really poor job with Batman in the Snyder-verse, but I enjoyed the Batman movie with Robert Pattinson. So, it's kind of it's one of those things where the argument I keep hearing from comic book folks is like, just do really good Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman movies, and you'll be fine. And honestly, I think the problem that killed the Snyderverse was that they wanted to be Marvel, and they actually had probably cast, other than Ezra Miller, probably cast all the perfect actors to play those characters. And all you had to do was do like they did with the Dark Knight and just do trilogies with like separate trilogies with those characters and stick to that. Because like honestly, I don't have to have an interconnected universe to
watch a superhero movie
to watch them. Right? If you can do a cohesive story from the first movie to the third movie, I don't care that it doesn't bother me at all that the Dark Knight trilogy is completely disconnected from the DC, from the Snyderverse and all that. Like, it doesn't bother me because they're really good movies, and so I would not care. I don't want DC to be like Marvel because Marvel is Marvel because they do what they do, and so DC needs to stop trying to be and just make good movies. Like, I would even be fine with Aquaman and Flash movies, even though they're less popular characters. I really enjoyed the first Aquaman movie. And so it's just one of those things where I think they have to stop trying to be Marvel and they have to start just sticking to their guns, which is what they haven't been doing. So that's my take on it anyway.
They also have to stop overpowering Superman. I'm just saying. Justice League, they literally couldn't do anything. And then all of a sudden Superman comes in and everything's taken care of. I'm sorry. Tangent.
No, it's a good point. And I think that you just have to get it. You either have to downplay him some, or you have to get a villain that's just like,
I think a good representation, I guess, or I can't remember what it was. It was a video somewhere, and it was at the end of Justice League when Superman throws the head of the villain, I can't even remember his name, in the portal, and Darkseid like steps on it.
Steppenwolf.
Yeah, so he throws his head in, and then Superman closes the portal before Darkseid can get out.
I totally have not seen this movie. You are ruining it for me.
Wow.
I don't have. Look, I don't.
How long it's been out?
HBO. I don't have an HBO Max subscription, so I can't.
Johnny literally could just text me. I'll give you my login, and you can create a
we're well past the.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm aware, and I've been wanting to watch it, but I just.
This was. You're talking about something that came out 6 years ago, almost to the day.
Not the Snyderverse, not the Snyder cut. I'm talking about the Snyder. Y'all are talking about the Snyder cut because Darkseid was not in the original Justice League.
Yes, it is a Snyder cut.
It's a Snyder cut, which was like what 3 years ago.
Yeah, I have not seen this one yet. I've been wanting to see it. I'm sorry.
Anyway,
I deserve to be spoiled.
The parallel between the main character, the main super strong character in DC. Well, he kind of runs away, shuts the portal, doesn't let doesn't fake the dark side, where you have Marvel, where Captain America's literally like tightening his shield about to apparently face the whole army of Thanos.
Well, he can do this.
That was the difference between Marvel and DC. I thought that was a funny video.
Yeah, I mean it's a setup and payoff, and I think like we were just talking about previously in our Marvel stuff, where it's like Marvel succeeded because they had a good setup and payoff in the first 3 phases. DC, there was they threw together a Justice League movie to try to rival the Avengers movies, and it was so bad because we didn't have an Aquaman introduction. Did we have the Wonder Woman movie before that came out, or was that after?
It was before, but you didn't have a Flash introduction either, or a Cyborg.
Yeah. So that just, to me, which I don't care about having a Cyborg movie because I don't really care that much about the character, but no, I'm sorry, I just don't.
All the introduction we got is all the introduction we need for that one.
Yeah, it's like with Hawkeye and Black Widow in the Avengers. I mean, in the Marvel stuff, where they added them in an Iron Man movie and a Thor movie. So, which is fine. I would have loved a Hawkeye, Black Widow, Budapest, like their origin story from the comics, where like Hawkeye's sent to assassinate Black Widow and he decides not to, and all that. I think they should have done a movie with that when they were younger. Like earlier on in phase 1 or 2, they should have done a movie of that to introduce them. And that's why when they went to do a Black Widow movie, it had like no stakes because they're like, yeah, she's going to die. So,
yeah.
But that's the thing, is like, I wouldn't have minded adding Cyborg in like that, but I think it's just kind of, there was not a cohesive plan. And I think
you see that, like everything before Justice League, I mean, blew their budget out of the water. Then you get to Justice League, and yeah, it did pretty good, and Aquaman did great. But then, you start seeing a fall off at Wonder Woman 1984. So, well, Birds of Prey, but that's not really as connected as.
Well, you look at the production budgets, right? So, Man of Steel, $225 million. Batman v Superman, $263. So, like, I mean, you'd expect it to be higher because it's a team up of sorts. And then you have Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, around the same, 175, 150. Justice League, obviously the most expensive. And then Aquaman, I mean, look how cheap Aquaman was compared to...
That's because it was a good story, even though it was a copy of the Black Panther movie.
And what I loved about... This is something I told...
It was.
This is something I told Sykes before, or after we went and saw Aquaman. I was like, what I loved about that movie is it had a good story, but it mixed different genres in it, where you had like this sort of Indiana Jones aspect to it. You had a little bit of a Jurassic Park almost sort of vibe to it. It just had, and then you had the superhero aspect where it just kind of had a cool, just a cool aesthetic to it. And it was just a lot of fun. They didn't take itself too seriously. And I think that's why I enjoyed it. It's my favorite Snyder-verse movie.
Here's the biggest thing to me. So Shazam, $85 million. In a 363, worldwide box office. That's great. The first Shazam movie was great.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. It just
totally
not a well-known character.
Totally unconnected to any other their DC main universe, whatever. Not connected to that at all. Well, then you get Shazam: Fury of the Gods. They spent a little bit more money on it, and they barely broke even. I mean, DC they're about like Marvel at this point. They've almost ruined their their just because of some of the decisions they've made. And like I said, Shazam's not even a part of their DC EU or the Snyder-verse or anything. But it's just
Shazam's a Snyder-verse movie. It's just not.
It's just not connected. There's no.
They just don't. connect them like they kind of. It's like they started connecting them with Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Wonder Woman, Justice League, and then they just kind of stopped at some point. And so, because you think about it, if we're looking at this list, really everything after Aquaman, is just kind of on its own thing.
Subpar.
Like Wonder Woman 1984 didn't really tie into anything, and the Suicide Squad was completely by itself. Black Adam, from everything I can understand, and so maybe that was the point where they realized we've got to reboot this thing, and they just stopped trying to interconnect it. But you look at the box office, little under $7 billion for all their movies. Marvel is at 30 billion, so it's like it's one of those things where you got to do something different, and what that looks like, I don't know, but
I mean, I think you kind of have to think about the feel of a lot of the movies. Like, I mean, Black Adam's one of them. The second Suicide Squad, 84. I mean, they all still have that like deep dark, the world is ending kind of vibe to them, which that for me personally, I don't consider myself to be a super like analytical moviegoer. Like I like more of a kind of lighter feel to stuff. Typically, like that's just DC's rep though, is they're often kind of this dark, dingy, like
but
emo
that's Zack Snyder though.
Yeah.
Because
but
if you watch a movie like 300, that's what he does.
Yeah, that was the case with a lot of these though.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Because he was the executive producer of the DC EU, all of those movies when he did Man of Steel, and Batman v Superman, and they had that sort of dark and dreary vibe to them. It's like, okay, we have to do this with every movie, which is not how Marvel did theirs, right? You look at something like, Captain or the first Iron Man, which felt very grounded and realistic, even with a lot of the technology he was using. And then you see something like Guardians of the Galaxy, which was a lot more like colorful and over the top. And it's like the fact that not all of their movies, like some are more gritty, like The Winter Soldier and Civil War, and then some of them are more sort of bright and vibrant, like Guardians Volume 2 and 3. And it's just like this idea that you have to make them all look the same is kind of ridiculous to me. And that's why I think Aquaman ended up doing well, was because it had a different look and feel to it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also, personally, I don't know that it's bad, but I do not like the VFX of most DC movies. Like, to me, the Flash was just bad. Like, I started to watch it and I was like, I'm done with this. The scene where he's like, with the babies falling out of the hospital, I think. Like that was just, I was like, that looks like a rubber like baby doll. And
that is also one of the ones I haven't watched yet. So
I've heard about.
You don't need to watch it.
Yeah, that's not a huge point at all. But like that same thing with Black Adam. Like Black Adam wasn't a bad movie, but it was just the VFX of it is almost video gamey in a way, just how they kind of modeled stuff.
So this is the best, the information that I have gathered. The reason behind everything from basically everything after the Suicide Squad, which from everything I've heard, the Suicide Squad was a pretty good looking movie, like VFX wise. I've not watched that one, so but my understanding is everything after that movie was basically more or less where they realized we're canning this whole Snyder-verse thing. We're starting over. And so when they were doing their post production and a lot of their VFX stuff, they're like, hey, let's not sink more money into these projects that we're not about to invest any more in, and like we're cutting off this timeline and everything. So that with the Flash, they basically threw it out there because they were like, well, let's just see if we can make some money off of it, because we're not like these stories are going to be obsolete within a few years anyway. And so what I've heard is like with the Flash, with I don't know, Blue Beetle, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, Black Adam, they kind of just were like, okay, let's just get these movies out and get them over with, because we've already finished them. We've already finished, filming and everything, and we don't want to blow all the money that we spent. So they're like, let's try to get a profit off of these. But that's my understanding of why the VFX was so bad with those. Now there's some not so great VFX in some of the other movies too, but those particularly, I think that was the reason why they were worse.
And if that's the case, then that makes sense. But there's definitely a point, like, I think 84, I remember that part of it being pretty good. And like the Snyder Justice League was pretty solid. Aquaman, I remember being pretty solid. But there was definitely somewhere in there where I was almost just like, I just don't want to watch these, because it almost looks like you're watching a video game in some aspects of it. It's just that, like, that Unity graphic kind of thing that just is not very appealing personally. It just doesn't feel real.
So with that in mind, we get away from we're transitioning now that, so once Aquaman The Lost Kingdom comes out next month, that's effectively ending the Snyder-verse. And then they're basically starting all over. We know from the announcements that James Gunn's taken over DC in terms of their movies. He's a very familiar face with superhero fans, obviously with the Guardians of the Galaxy stuff, the Suicide Squad, stuff like that. But I wanted us to get into some of his announcements and talk about, do we think that the direction that he is taking DC is going to be a step up from what we just got? And I think it's a good point of discussion.
So his first, I was about to say his first one is what? The Superman Legacy movie?
Yes. And that's supposed to be a younger Superman, and which I am on the bandwagon. I don't know if you can call it bandwagon. I'm on the side of the people who say you should have kept some of these actors when you rolled this over, because it's going to be hard to get the casting so good again. Mm-hmm. The first thing I would have done is something that Sykes mentioned earlier, which was implement Grant Gustin's Flash into the universe. Throw a big bag of money at Stephen Amell to come back as the Green Arrow, in movie form, because that was a show that I watched for 5 seasons and loved. That was a good show. Before it went downhill, and I watched the first 3 seasons of The Flash and I enjoyed those.
I've watched every season of The Flash, every single one of them.
So I think what they need to do is like, hey, go get those characters and do, even if you just like a one-off movie with those characters. Maybe you had Grant Gustin and Stephen Amell do a movie together. I don't know, just be kind of cool for them. Like, you got to go with something that fans generally accept, because I think the issue with James Gunn, I think sometimes there is good justification to cutting your losses and wiping the slate clean and starting over with new actors and everything. I understand the thought process behind that, but with the state of how the fandom was in terms of the DC stuff, because like Batman's my favorite superhero. That doesn't mean I understand the comic stuff that well, but I'm somewhat more invested in that, I guess, that universe maybe in some ways.
Right. Well, you're talking about actors. I mean, you've already got a Batman. Why do we have to cast another one? Just Robert Pattinson may not be the best Batman in the world, but why get another one?
As long as it's Christian Bale, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Even then, why
Well,
have
and that's the thing
and
too, is like
the Brave and the Bold is actually a really good. That's like the only comic book series I ever read, but that was a very good comic series. So you were finally going to get a Robin in live action, not in a TV show. But
well, I think where you're gonna run into stuff with that is like the point that we're making with the Batman thing is like we've had just about more Batmans than we've had any other superhero. We've had, you had the Adam West Batman, you had the Michael Keaton Batman, you had, Val Kilmer, you had George Clooney, and then you had Christian Bale and now Ben Affleck and Robert Pattinson. So it's like
And you
at
technically
this
had the
point,
kid from Gotham.
Gotham, yeah. What's that? His name escapes me. I watched the first couple seasons of that.
that got weird quick.
It, yes, that's mainly why I quit watching it because I was like, this is strange.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think the Supergirl movie. What they've all that they've announced, all that they've announced. I was going to say all that they've announced are not bad starting movies, but like the second one on your list there, I think was the Authority. So how are you just going to make that like the Eternals? Because that's basically the Eternals, is it not?
Here is my biggest issue with James Gunn's slate of movies. Now, we understand James Gunn's style of movie making. He's a bit of quirky. He likes a lighthearted comedy centric, not to the point of like some of the hardcore Marvel stuff always, but like he can do more serious stuff. I mean, you see Guardians Volume 3 is like a really serious movie for like the majority of it, and it's done really well. And so I think the issue with him is he likes to lean on a lot of times more obscure stuff that he can kind of do his own thing with. And when you get into stuff like The Authority, which honestly, until that announcement was made, I had never heard of The Authority before. And so that's the problem, right? For me, as I guess I'd be categorized as a normie because I don't read the comics. When you look at people like us that just watch them for the characters we know, I mean, Swamp Thing, Creature Commandos. Do we really want to see an Amanda Waller movie?
Oh, those are TV shows.
Okay, shows. I mean, I might be interested in the Lanterns, and what the heck is Paradise Lost? So it's which I know. I understand. I know.
It's like Wonder
I know
Woman.
what it is based on the description. I'm just saying, like, what to me the biggest issue that is going to face these announcements is that basically the opposite of what we were saying earlier is, yeah, there's a Superman and a Batman movie, but every other movie they're doing is like more obscure characters. And so how are you going to get people invested in that is my question. I just think you're going to end up in a similar boat to where you are now, where it's like people just kind of don't care because the character, like Blue Beetle, who wants to see a Blue Beetle movie?
But I think it's similar where like is the problem more that like I'm trying to think about how to put this. Like you want a good baseline, which means that right off the bat, everything isn't super interconnected. But I think the thing is that you have to choose if you are going to go that route or if you're going to connect everything right off the bat. Like which way do you want to go with it? And that's almost the thing with like Marvel's identity crisis right now is they like nixed all these characters one way or another, and they're trying to continue along the line of keeping this interconnection, but they're also like resetting in a way, and they're trying to do both things at the same time. As long as they pick one way or the other, I think it's okay if you make the expectation that, hey, we're introducing a new wave of this character. It's not the same as what's been before. I mean, you can do that and it can be done well. You just have to pick, in my mind, which way you want to go.
But and it's not that this can't work, because like I'm gonna give James Gunn a fair shake and say, hey, let's see what you can do, because I mean a young Superman movie could be kind of interesting. I would like for it to. I'd much rather see a Robert Pattinson Batman with a Robin than I would an older Batman and a Robin.
I think they're doing another Batman with Robert
Yeah.
Pattinson.
They are, yeah. They're still doing a second. That's supposed to come out, I think, 2025, but it's not connected to the James Gunn stuff. It's still Matt Reeves. It's like him doing his own thing. So, and that's fine. Like, I honestly just wish they would let other directors kind of do that, like a Christopher Nolan. Like, hey, you go do your own thing with this character for 3 movies or whatever, and then let someone else do this and someone else do that. But I think with having James Gunn come in, it's like the Brave and the Bold is gonna be an older Batman and a younger Robin, and he's gonna basically start ceding his responsibility to him, to where I guess eventually he becomes Nightwing and all those sort of things. So I would like for them to stick with a younger one, or maybe at least a middle age, but it's because I want to see Batman, and I feel like this one's going to end up turning into more of a Robin thing eventually. And so I don't know. I think it's going to be weird having 2 Batmans going at one time. People are going to be really confused by that.
Yeah.
So I'm more excited for the Robert Pattinson Batman, because we're probably getting I hope they don't do a Joker, because that'll be just like The Dark Knight being the second movie in the trilogy. But
Pretty sure they are doing another Joker.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
was going to say
connected.
they announced the Joker.
they need to wait and do him in the final movie, and they need to do they can't do Bane again. You got to do like a Killer Croc or something that they haven't done yet. That'd be kind of cool. But yeah, they had to get creative with that, because it's kind of it would just feel like, hey, you're just copying Christopher Nolan if you do your second movie as Joker,
Or do like
Right.
a Penguin.
Yeah.
Penguin would be fun.
Penguin's
Or,
just kind of hard to do, because he's not
or the
very
Riddler.
yeah. Well, I don't know. They've already done Riddler, so
But they haven't done him in a movie, have they?
they did him in the Robert Pattinson movie.
Oh, I didn't watch that.
Yeah.
I'm
They
not
had
on the Robert Pattinson train. So
You got I tell people it's not the best, necessarily the best Batman movie as a whole. Like, the story's not the greatest, but I will say the way that Gotham is filmed feels the most like Gotham City of any of the other ones. And so I liked the aesthetic. They don't give Robert Pattinson anything to work with. He plays the same character, whether he's Bruce Wayne or Batman in the movie. So it's like nothing. But it's got some good moments in it. And for about 2/3 of the movie, it's pretty entertaining. And then the end falls flat a little bit. But
I just think it's hard to live up against Dark Knight. It's like no one can play Batman. It's like impossible unless they just completely reimagine what like the Batman story looks like, that's not what they've done. With Ben Affleck and Robert Pattinson, they've kept it along the same. And I know Batman's a dark hero, but keep it along the same line instead of trying to make it their own. I mean, you can make it like a Mel Gibson Batman that's a little bit more, fantastic rather than, dark. I don't know if that makes sense.
when you said Mel Gibson, I'm assuming you meant Michael Keaton.
Michael Keaton. No, Mel Gibson. I thought he played Batman.
Not that I'm aware of.
Maybe he played a villain.
I don't think he played a villain in any of the Batman movies.
Mel Gibson.
Tommy Lee Jones did, and Jim Carrey, and Danny DeVito, Jack Nicholson. I think of the other ones.
Maybe it was.
Schwarzenegger.
They offered it to him. They offered him to play Batman, to play Bruce Wayne, but
Maybe
so-
that was it.
But I think what the problem is like what made Christian Bale so good as Batman in the Batman movies is the fact that he could play both Batman and Bruce Wayne really well, and they felt like two different characters. Whereas when they did the Batman with Robert Pattinson, it was like they wanted to make him this really, because I think he's in like his second year as being Batman when the movie starts, and so he's pretty young and inexperienced in a lot of ways, but they try to make it to where he's still like reeling from his parents' death, and he's sort of this cut off from society, and he never gets out of his house. He's like a recluse, and he's, when he goes out, he looks depressed all the time, and which, fits the character to a degree, but at the same time, like the whole point of Bruce convincing people he's not Batman or anything to do with it is the fact that when he goes out, he's basically this billionaire playboy that you couldn't ever imagine him being a vigilante, jumping off rooftops. And so you don't get any of that in this movie. But I think the problem is they try to basically they want to just be different from the other Batmans when you really just have to stick to how he is in the comics. And I think that's what people want to see.
This is why we just need Christian Bale back.
Yeah.
Fixes everything.
They should have done they should have done it. They should do Flashpoint, but do Flashpoint right and have all the Batmans. They should do like George Clooney's Batman, and they should do like all the Batmans come back for a cameo.
Do you not know how frustrated I was in the Flash movie? And I know, Johnny, you haven't seen it, but in the movie, there's a point in where they literally have all of the previous Flashes in there, and they do fan service to the the prior Flashes, and Grant is not in there
at all.
And I was sitting there like,
what's the point of this?
Yeah. Also, I definitely did get Mel Gibson messed up with Michael Keaton. I don't know how that happened, but
it happens to all of us.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it'd be kind of cool if they did a Brave and the Bold and had like Christian Bale come back as Batman to play the older Batman, but then you would have to like recast the Robin they had in Christopher Nolan's Robin at the end of The Dark Knight Rises. So
I wish they would have done more with that.
Yeah, but but also Christian Bale said he would never play Batman again unless Christopher Nolan directed. So, which would be awesome. But I doubt that ever happens again. Christopher Nolan's made some pretty final remarks about never doing superhero movies again. So,